Well, I guess Mr. Eisenhower was right. He said to watch out for the educational and military industrial complexes that came about after World War II and have been with us ever since, growing ever stronger and larger in their influence. Well, what's happening at this point is that it's very clear that the military industrial complexes ideals are completely in opposition to the ideals upon which the USA was founded. These ideals of liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And the system, it's so deeply ingrained within the system in the USA now that it's starting to act against the interests of the people. It's starting to act against the interests of the ideals of the USA. So these freedom principles, which were once strong in the USA, are now being diminished. They're being undermined. And you see things like Tornado Cash, Samurai Wallet. There's certain things that happen on those systems that I personally don't agree with that shouldn't have happened. But at the same time, they're supposed to be freedom-based technologies. And the idea of code as freedom of speech, freedom of expression, is something that we should be very cautious not to move away from. The ideals of the USA, I think, ultimately will protect people from this, but we shouldn't be naive about it. I mean, you can see the poor guys from these systems they've been incarcerated. They're not having a very good time right now, I'm sure. Now, with Tornado Cash, the problem that the system has with Tornado Cash is that it's actually decentralized and it's still operational. Even though the devs have been removed from the situation, the code still runs and people still use it. Well, that's a truly decentralized system, and it's the way that these systems should be built. The problem is if you build them in the USA, you're at risk of having your life ruined for a couple of years. Now, I think that the freedom of speech rules will prevail in the USA and these devs will get off on freedom of expression. However, if there is evidence that they willingly process transactions as part of their system, and those transactions were from illegal states, if there's hard evidence, it's going to get really messy. And this is just a fact of these systems, right? If you build freedom systems, if you build open source systems that can't be shut down, and then you run the infrastructure that operate those systems, and you're in countries that are opposed to this type of behavior, they're going to come after you. This is very clear at this. Again, I think it's a little bit of a bluff. You know, they're making examples of people to try and corral them away from ever writing this type of code, from ever working on these projects. But it's very clear that there's multiple thousands of people in the industry that just will not listen to that, and they're going to keep working no matter what. You know, they want this technology out there, they want it available, and they want to run the infrastructure that helps it operate. Some of them will get smart and move to jurisdictions where they can't be extradited from, or corralled from, or pressured in. They'll move to jurisdictions that are more pro freedom of expression, pro freedom of speech. Many jurisdictions will pop up because of that, because of the clear overbearing power of the military-industrial complex in the USA and the way it treats its general populace. Samurai Wallet was a bit different because Samurai Wallet was a centralized service, although they never held custodial funds. So Samurai Wallet's they're going to go after them on well, you enabled the service. Okay, you never handled the funds, but you ran the tech that enabled the service. So that's the core thing here. That's the core theme. If you run the tech that enables the service or the action to happen, and you don't check that action, you're at risk of being come down upon by a government. So there's a pushback here, because the more people that build this technology and operate it, and the more it's possible to happen, the more people the government's going to have to go after. Now, maybe the government's going to go after every single one of them operating this technology, but that's a big, tall task, and it's going to get pretty oppressive and overbearing at some point. You know, the government's got to be very, very careful how they play that game. So at the moment, they've arrested some key figures, and they're trying to make an example of it to discourage other people from doing this. But I know that's not what's happening. Lots of other people are still building this technology, and they're still operating it. I'd advise most of those people to have an exit plan. I'd advise them to stick with their ideals and move to wherever they need to move to make whatever principles that they hold dear continue. I don't think we should be naive about this. However, at the same time, there is optimism, because it's clear that they can't arrest everyone. It's clear that this technology is still happening, it's still moving forwards, and a lot of it, if it's done properly, with no ICO, no pre-mine, no centralized and control entity, it still operates after the devs have been arrested. So now devs aren't stupid, you know, they're smart. They're going, okay, well, how do I build this completely anonymously, right? How do I leave it so there's no traces, and then we just set it running and off it goes, and then people from all over the world can run the infrastructure. It just stays online. Maybe it gets to a case where if you're running DEX infrastructure, if you're running swap infrastructure on these systems, you may have to just have a check and balance that says, if you're from the USA, you got to provide some form of details to my node, so that I'll be happy to process that information. But I think a lot of devs will just say, I'm just banning, if you're from the USA, I'm just banning the service. I'm just not going to provide the service. The other way to do this, I think, as well, is if the services are genuine and the swaps are genuinely for the masses, then the vast majority of swaps, 99% of them will just be like $5 to $100. And it's really freaking hard to make the case that there's money laundering going on, that there's state activity going on there when someone, for example, in the Spend HBD initiative, that's just mining crypto, mining a stable coin by blogging, taking $5 or $10 of it and going and spending it on a coffee and then blogging about that and earning some more crypto back, and the cycle kind of repeats. It creates a parallel economy that never touches the banking system, but they're using it to provably buy a coffee or some small shopping. It's very hard to say that's money laundering. And so these services, these swap services, there's some heed to be taken in keeping the transactions small. But then again, you can argue, well, if you're going to restrict the size of the transactions, is that really freedom? No, it's not. And a lot of these people are freedom-based. The whole movement's freedom mentality, as much as it can be. Although a lot of people have failed at that because of conflict of interest with chasing money instead of chasing freedom ideals and principles. But that's going to be a bridge that's going to have to be crossed when it comes. And I think a lot of devs are holding out. I speak to a lot of devs. I hear what they're worried about, what their concerns are. A lot of them are saying, well, this is like they're just trying to make an example. But what they're doing is the people that have arrested from Tornado Cash and the people that have arrested from Samurai Wallet, they're going to try and make an example of them and deter other people from doing this in the future. But at the same time, there's a good chance that the US Constitution holds up and says that this is freedom of speech, freedom of expression. As long as there's not like straight up clear evidence that they were processing like some terrorist organization's fees, and that terrorist organization is using those funds to oppose the US government. I mean, if you did that knowingly, you're going to struggle in the future, I think. But if you're doing it unknowingly, well, you shouldn't ever do that. If you're in the US and you're doing that and you're funding something that's contrary to the US, I mean, you expect the state to come down on you. But if you're doing it in a fair way that's processing small transactions that serving the average person, you're going to be able to, it's going to be very hard for them to say that you're doing anything dodgy against the state. Especially if it's small fee transactions that are just clearly provably going to buy things straight away, like buy small coffees or whatever. You can't say that that's money laundering. So you've got a good strong case there if that's the way that the system's operating. So it's still up in the air, but maybe the Constitution comes through somehow and it protects these people in a couple of years. So they've ruined the lives of a few guys, right? I mean, that's freaking terrible. And they'll try and use that to deter people. So they can ruin your life. They can put a shitload of legal costs on you, bankrupt you, throw you in prison for a couple of years until you're proven not guilty, or the Supreme Court constitutionally proves that you're not guilty, and then you come out the other end. But that's a different man, that's a different life, you know? But in the meantime, all the other devs working on this stuff are kind of hoping, well, they can't arrest all of us, so we'll just keep working. And in a couple of years, when that storm passes over, then the situation will be more clear and we can keep working. And if not, if it turns out that the US Supreme Court, which is probably where this will end up going to, rules against, then those devs will be looking to leave the country before that happens, right? Or by that time, they will have built the tech setup, it'll be running. If they've done it anonymously, they'll be working in other jobs and other industries, and by that time, it will kind of have passed on. So that's the feeling, the sentiment that I'm currently getting from the developer community. It's very interesting, definitely keeping our eyes on this story. But have no doubt, if the state suspects you of processing transactions that are contrary to its interests, it's coming after you. And so if you are doing that, or if you're running a service that does that, then you heed the advice to either not be in the jurisdiction of the USA, figure out a way to comply with USA rules, or run the system completely anonymously, or as anonymously as you can do. That's what I'm hearing that people are doing. But it's very, very interesting times right now, and definitely keeping our ears on the pulse of this story as it progresses. And I don't know for sure, you can never say for sure, but I do think that the guys that built this technology are genuine people, and they just wanted to be able to have a free transaction layer where anyone can do transactions on and transfer and do swaps. And it just so happened that probably some sketchy entities or organizations anonymously tried to use the system, and it's been proven that they did use those systems, and it's contrary to the interests of the USA's military-industrial complex. I mean, it's a freaking tough spot, man. It's a tough spot. So we'll keep our eyes on this. Certainly keep speaking to the developer community and understanding what their worries and concerns are, if they've got any. Most of them are chill. Most of them are like, it will blow over. That's my impression so far. All right, to the next one.